Hey writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspirations for growing your self-publishing business.
I'm your host, Stephanie McGrath, and the Publisher Operations Specialist here at Kobo Writing Life.
And I'm your co-host, Joni DePlacido, on the business team at Kobo Writing Life.
This week we talked to Robert Craven. He's an author that lives in Ireland, and we learned a little bit more about his series, the Ava series, where he talked to us about how he approaches writing strong female characters.
Yeah, and he chatted to us a little bit about the author scene and the author community in the UK and Ireland.
So yeah, please keep listening.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Robert.
Well, thank you for having me.
Could you start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you started writing and publishing?
Okay, I live in Ireland and I've been writing for the past 13 years. I have a series of espionage novels out, and I decided to digress away from that particular genre and do a sort of a Bond kind of thriller, straightforward kind of short book. And it's titled The Road of a Thousand Tigers. It's available on Kobo. It did go to #1 in sales in Canada, US, and New Zealand about 4 or 5 days, and then it stayed charting for most of the latter half of the month of July. So it's been a surprise book, but it has done very, very well.
Excellent. Do you always do indie publishing, or were you originally traditionally published?
Well, it's kind of a roundabout way. I was signed to a small press with my first novel, Get Lennon. That did quite well. It was put up on the Amazon platform, but the company in question went bust, and then I had to sort of go around a few other small presses, but eventually, sort of 3 years ago, I had mixed sort of success with small presses, and then just went primarily with the Kobo platform. And then that seemed to be the most user-friendly for me. I've gone back onto Amazon for the KDP, but also for the paperbacks. So I found taking control of my own work quite a long period, as well as trying to write, as well as trying to promote. As I said, the books are doing quite well. As I said, The Road of a Thousand Tigers went to #1, and on the basis of that, I was allowed to pitch to this festival in Scotland called Bloody Scotland. It's the second largest publishing fair in Scotland after the Edinburgh Book Fair, and I just pitched a 100-word pitch for the book, and then myself and 8 other authors were picked out of close to 100 submissions to go and give a 3-minute pitch to a team of industry specialists and publishing and agencies.
That's pretty cool. How do you approach that? You do 100-word. I assume the first one is a written pitch. Is that right?
The first one is a written pitch, and with that, you have to think very carefully about what you're going to do. I think if you are going to pitch any novel to a publisher, the most you should do is 25 words. And 25 words is just about the right length without getting convoluted and getting bogged down. So the pitch for The Road for a Thousand Tigers is very simply a comment that goes, a weekend in Paris doesn't go to plan, and Sebastian Holt finds himself in Tel Aviv with the KGB and the CIA on his tail. So that's the pitch, and that's the premise of the book. I mean, with that, you're trying to hook the interest almost straight away. By saying Paris, Tel Aviv, KGB and CIA, those 4 kind of words really lock into what the book is about.
Do you have to go in depth on the plot, or like any twists, or can you just keep it kind of vague?
Well, the whole 2 minutes, really, what I stressed was, and one thing that I do enjoy doing is I have 4 very strong female characters. What I found with Get Lennon, Zinman, A Finger a Night, and Hollow Point is that my principal character is a female spy. So straight away, my readership has expanded, and she essentially finds herself in a lot of adventures, and women readership really want to see a strong character. And particularly, well, it's you have to think of that. I mean, in these sort of crash bang wallet books, what's the difference between, say, a Lara Croft character or a James Bond? With The Road of a Thousand Tigers, I have 4 principal female characters. The leading villain is a woman, a Russian KGB operative, and the love interest is a French journalist who isn't everything that she seems. So through the course of that pitch, you have to be mindful of your audience. And I usually find particularly in Ireland in crime fiction, women are really forging ahead. We've a couple of Irish authors, Sam Blake, Catherine Howard, and Olivia Kiernan, who are really writing top-notch thrillers. And really, they're capturing that element of audience and reading. So you have to be mindful of that and watch what they do and see how they do it. And I just enjoy writing female characters. And the villain in this Road of a Thousand Tigers is probably the best thing I've ever done. I was just laughing as I was typing and creating her. She's so extreme, but she works.
What's your background? Did you start out in doing something that was related to?
No, I kind of got into writing in a roundabout way. On my 40th birthday, it was on my bucket list, and I said I'm going to write a novel. So I sort of set out doing it, and I thought, what would be a good idea? And what I did read was a review many years ago of a book called Lenin's Embalmers by Ilya Zabarsky, who is the son of the embalmer for Lenin when he died. And the most interesting premise was that when Germany invaded Russia in 1941, the first thing they did was they moved the entire mausoleum on a train 1,000 miles behind the Urals. And I thought, well, that's a great idea for a book, a what if. So what if the Germans went to get him and they sent a crack team in? So that was the premise of Get Lenin. And it was quite a long process. I wasn't published till about 5 years later on a small press, but I was writing that, living it for about 5 years solid. The rest of the books of the series came a lot easier because I had such a wealth of material, and built it into 4 books that are now currently out there. And so I kind of drifted into it. I sort of was a musician for a few years, so I've always had this mindset of, the element of marketing. I used to go around in the 80s with a bucket of slop and posters and just slap it on the hoardings. So I constantly get my links and I just clip them onto other people's walls in the hope they don't get blocked.
Yeah.
So I've been writing. It's still a hobby. I work for a living. The royalties aren't that great, but it's something that I really enjoy doing. I'm fascinated by history, and I just enjoy writing. I find it a good way to sort of tap into a creative streak.
So you mentioned that you liked writing strong female characters. Do you have any tips on how to approach writing that? Maybe from like a male perspective?
Well, actually, it's an interesting thing. I read it somewhere recently that there really is no difference between men and women. That's the way I look at it. I know some women writers who capture male characters quite well. I think the trick is that you just try to think of the person in the situation and how they will react. I don't think gender comes into it. Though in the Get Lenin books, my character Ava, she's a bit larger than life. She's extremely glamorous, so she'll use her wiles to get her way. But overall, I think the approach as a man writing a woman is just put a character into a position and think, how would you get out of it? Because for me, I don't think there's really much difference between men and women. And sometimes you can have a lot of fun with that, bring out the slightly male element. Or in the book A Finger a Night, I had to think about how Ava would fight a guy in a bar and figure out what sort of move she could do. So, I thought about, she did a lot of dodging, but kind of kicked him in the knee, kicked him in the ankle, got him on the ground. That kind of idea. There wasn't kind of a slugfest going. So I think the solution for me writing female characters is to actually just put yourself in their position and then look at it from there.
I think that's really good advice. Like write real characters and then.
Yeah, I think the character, it doesn't matter whether they wear a dress or a suit. I think, if you're in a situation, or I'm in a situation, you're going to think things out differently. I think everybody's different, but kind of the same. It's a bit of a cliche.
Can you tell us about the Bloody Scotland Festival? Is it specific to crime fiction?
It is specific to crime fiction. I was quite amazed I actually got invited, but because there's quite a criminal element to the book itself that I pitched, it is very well marketed. It is geared toward an international kind of market, I suppose, for want of a better word. A lot of the big hitters come down to have a look at it. It's been going for 8 years. This was the most successful to date. It's one that's growing all the time, and it's appearing a lot on the Scottish cultural calendar. And I came over from Ireland. There was a lad called Dave Smith flew in from Washington, D.C., and last year, people came in to pitch from Australia. So it does have very much an international flavour. They have excellent panels and workshops. And Stirling is an amazing city. It is truly beautiful. And when you arrive there, it's kind of cradled between the highlands and the lowlands. It's a very stone city. And there's a big 7-foot statue of William Wallace, Braveheart, and there's very much an energy about that. Now, I flew in on the Sunday and flew back out, but on the Friday they have a torchlight parade that goes right through the city as the sun is going down. So there's a huge push on bringing the tourists in as well to have a look at the whole festival. And there's kind of crime writers, there's spy, there's espionage, there's the perfect pitch where people come in to see it, there's panel analysis. It's a very slick operation.
That sounds great. I really think we need to start checking out these.
Yeah, someone living out there.
Yeah. Well, during the pitch, one of the things I did say was that I was a Kobo writer. Kobo is quite, I don't think there's too many Irish writers using the platform, and I think it is a very good platform. And I did stress at the time that The Road of 1,000 Tigers had gone to #1 as a Kobo publication. I think it's because it's still an ebook that it might not be considered the same, but I think it's something that should be pitched. There's a couple of writers I know who are trying to write books. I'm saying just go to the platform. It's very user-friendly.
It is user-friendly. We like to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Was your plan always to go wide with distribution, or is that something you kind of realized later on?
I realized the hard way, trial and error. I found that, when you're working with Amazon works, it equally has a huge, broad appeal. But what I like about the Kobo platform is it actually gives you these wee maps that tells you where your books are selling and how they're doing, and the notifications are very good. But it was trial and error. I sort of stumbled onto Kobo when I was reclaiming all of my work back and looking at e-platforms. I was using Smashwords, Amazon, but really Kobo is kind of my preferred one.
Great to hear.
Yeah. Do you find you have a lot of readers in Canada?
We do, yeah. My books sell very well in Canada. Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Starting to make inroads into the UK market, but haven't sold one in Ireland yet. And Europe is pretty much the same, but sort of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, very much. I'd say Canada, the bulk of my sales.
And can you tell us a little bit about your writing process?
Yeah, sure. The process is basically I hoard notebooks. I generally write everything out longhand. I'm quite detailed how I approach it. I got into the habit of writing a 100-word synopsis, and then I move that up to a 500-word synopsis, and then I write out a 1,000-word synopsis. That's my skeleton, that's the framework. And from there I start breaking down the chapters. I generally write out longhand, then type it out, and gradually build. My own discipline is I'm kind of an insomniac. I'm up at 5 every morning, and I usually write between 5 and 7:30 before I go out. You do that for 3 months, you have pretty much a book down. And then from that, I generally put it in a drawer, and I'm working with an editor called Derek Suffing, and then I send the proofs out to him, and then we start the process of going backward and forward and rewriting. So even though The Road of 1,000 Tigers is quite a small book, it did take close to 5 to 6 months to finish out. The bigger books, the Eeverythings, take around about a year between the times you've got historical fiction checked. You get a 1-star review by a raincoat because you used the wrong gun that wasn't manufactured like 2 years later. So they're quite good that way. So that's the process. It generally takes about a year to write a book. As I said, with The Road of 1,000 Tigers, slightly shorter, but it's basically just longhand typing and synopsis, and then handing it out to an editor.
How do you approach researching, especially for historical fiction?
Researching, I do a lot of reading. I've got a mountain of books. So, for example, with the Get Lenin series, I read a number of biographies, Stalin's biography, Ian Kershaw's excellent Hitler biography, and you get a flavor for the time. Also, there's a few books and links and sites that you do. So what I generally do is place my characters in the history and then try to flesh the history around it.
Do you think there's any common mistakes people make when writing a crime fiction novel?
I think the most common mistake is that they fall into cliche. I think a lot of crime fiction is larger than, you've larger than life characters, but I think an awful lot of crime is a result of stupidity, the wrong thing done at the wrong time, the wrong person, the wrong place. And I think a lot of crime fiction that I've read It's either too gory or it's too technical. You've got the whole kind of Nordic noir, and that's quite bloody, which is great. Some people have an appetite for that. And then you go to the other side, you've got Patricia Cornwell, and you've got the forensic science behind it, and it almost goes into the minutiae. And I think some people just want to read a story about characters and how crime affects them, and then the sort of, hopefully, the justice that falls against the perpetrators. It's a trick to make crime interesting, but I think most great books are character driven. I think if you've got good characterization, I think a lot of readers will enjoy it more than they would about the gore, the mutilation, or the actual crimes itself.
I wonder if there's been a resurgence, though, because there's podcasts, true crime podcasts and true crime documentaries right now. It's just huge.
Well, Netflix as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Your one series follows one character, right? Ava?
Yeah, Ava, yeah.
How do you plan out a series like that? Because you have the one main character, and then how do you make sure every book builds upon that?
Well, I've been kind of ruthless with that one because Ava's based on where I work. There's a lot of Polish girls, and their grandmothers and their great aunts were these couriers that traveled across the Reich in the 1930s and 40s, bringing coded messages to the British. So, first of all, I put her in Central Europe. I made her Polish, but she's only going to survive the war. So the last one, which I'm working on at the moment, is only a year after the war. And I don't really sort of, she's kind of going to go out with a machine gun and a cocktail dress. That's one of the plans. Hoping that she can come back. But no, I always had a specific plan. This character would only inhabit the war, and she would only be around as long as World War II ran. So even at a stretch, I'm setting this last one, which is called Eagles Hunt Wolves in 1946. So with that, you've kind of got a framework already because she's 18 when the war starts, so she's going to be 29 at the end of it all, roughly, thereabouts. And then, because she's working for British intelligence and because she's multilingual, you can drop her into all these situations and really have a lot of fun with her. I mean, it's a good character. If it was ever made into a movie, I think any actress would jump at it.
Are people listening?
Yeah, you got to pitch that movie next. So you're based in Ireland now, is that right?
Yep, I live in Ireland.
Yeah, and what's the is there a big indie writer community in Ireland?
It's growing. I think an awful lot of writers are finding it frustrating that there's a glass ceiling is not the right word for it, but there's a barrier for a lot of what is being read in Ireland. It's a very small country with a population of just under 5 million, so naturally commercial considerations have to go with what the market is reading. At the moment, there's sort of a rise in writers coming up with stories that are very close to sort of the Irish mindset, the funeral, the wake, kind of angst of coming out of a very rigid post-Catholic country. And I think a lot of writers who have better ideas or want to move past that are turning more and more closely to indie platforms, particularly Amazon, particularly Kobo, and Smashwords.
Are there any resources or anything you've found specifically in Ireland that you'd recommend to somebody who's looking to start out?
There's a great site called writing.ie, everything's.ie. It's a very, very useful resource. It's run by a very wily woman, Vanessa Fox O'Loughlin, and it's very easy to access, and it has really good resources, but also great tips and hints, and sometimes writers are invited to send suggestions in. So I've published a few articles on that site about various sort of technical sides to writing, and also just promoting the book and mentioning the Pitch Perfect.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how do you do marketing, or how do you approach marketing for your titles?
Well, marketing is, I pretty much live on Twitter. The platform that works for me the best is Twitter. It's using the hashtag. I just sort of target Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursday mornings. I try to come up with taglines all the time, small, easy kind of images of the book, plus reviews. Every morning during the sort of December months, I had this small campaign called the 12 Days of Ava, where I had hashtag 12 Days of Ava, gave a historical fact or gave some mention of the character, and that really took off. It kind of followed the 12 pubs of Christmas, the 12 days of Christmas. The 12 was a key point. The other thing is just hashtags ASMSG, and I'm constantly contacting other kind of writers or writer groups that are very happy to retweet and work. Instagram doesn't work as well, although it does have its uses for competitions. If I'm setting up a giveaway, Instagram is more effective than Twitter because everybody's giving away something on Twitter. With the Facebook platform, all my books have their own individual Facebook page, and I invite people to like and share and run competitions through that. So Twitter, Facebook, particularly I've got another festival reading coming up now, the Murder One Festival in November in Dublin. It's a big UNESCO one. And this is going to be a very big kind of event. And I use sort of an event invitation to bring people down to have a look at it through the Facebook page.
And is the Murder One Festival a signing event? It's open to readers as well as writers?
It's open to readers and writers, and it is a signing event. It's we have a couple of local bookshops will take in the author's work and then sell them off. But I'll be doing a reading from it. So they've got sort of a banqueting hall and a podium, and 12 writers get up for 15 minutes to read a piece, and then afterwards, if people want to buy the book off you or sign it, they come up to you and have a chat. So it's another big one. It's a 3-day festival in Dublin between the 1st and the 4th of November. And last year they had Val McDermott over, and they had a couple of the really big writers that are coming up at the moment. As I said, it's mostly women driving crime in Ireland, which is great, you know.
Yeah, our manager is from Cork. She's there right now. So we'll need to get her to look into this, get her to presence in Ireland.
Yeah, we'll tell her. So my question, I guess, is what do you think, and this maybe you've already answered this, but what do you think has been the best thing that you've done for your writing business?
The best thing I've done for my writing business, I think, is just getting out and knocking on doors. I find radio very effective. I think if you contact local radio stations, they're always looking for a local interest article, and there's 2 Dublin stations have always been very, very helpful and supportive of what I do. So if I could say anything, it was picking up a telephone or contacting an email and talking to a radio station, because radio is still very, very valid as a medium for promoting stuff. And as I said, they're always looking for local interest, always looking for some story that they can sell. So I would definitely say for me, 2 Dublin radio stations, Q102 and Today FM, have been more than supportive of my work.
That's cool. I wouldn't have thought to do that.
But it makes sense.
Yeah, it's one of those things you never think about, but radio is a very good way, and they'll bring you on, and even on a phone call have a 15, 20 minute chat.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. What can readers expect from you next? What are you working on?
Well, I'm still plugging hard on the Road of 1,000 Tigers. Ava's 5th and final adventure is out with the editors. I'm hoping to bring that out in November. That's called Eagles Hunt Wolves. It's set in the 6 months immediately after the fall of Berlin, where she's tracking down a missing agent, and it turns into a far more sinister event than she expected. And pretty much like Game of Thrones, a lot of people are going to die in it. A lot of the characters don't make it. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. Obviously, I'm pitching The Road of 1,000 Tigers around to a number of agencies and publishers, and I'm going to start working possibly on the second one after that, maybe January, February.
Excellent. We'll include links.
Just keep writing. That's the plan. Just keep writing.
Do you have any recommendations for any books you think someone should pick up and try?
At the moment, I'm a big fan of the Mick Herron series, Mickheron, the Slow Horses series, which is kind of a twist on the Le Carré, where it's a house set up for failed agents who have really messed up with MI5, and they find themselves drifting into adventures despite themselves. And his books are absolutely excellent. I kind of nearly gave up writing after reading the 5th one. But
that's quite the compliment for him.
Yeah. As I said, the Irish authors that I would recommend, certainly Sam Blake. She's got 3 great books out at the moment. Olivia Kiernan, she has a couple. There's a nice move toward Irish crime where the protagonists are women, female detectives within, any kind of police force is extremely male environment. So these authors really twist the female character into a unique situation of working in a very kind of patriarchal system. So I'd recommend those books as well. They're the kind of the books I'm reading at the moment. Big fan of Mick Herron. Of course, I still read John Le Carré. Obviously, the more I'm reading these, the better the feel I get for what my own writing is doing.
Yeah, we'll include those links. I'm curious, when you talk about doing like female-driven stories, do you find that your audience leans female, or is it men and women that both read it?
It's men and women. The messages I've got back on Facebook pages, one of the best ones I got from a woman she's Ukrainian but living in Dublin, was she just sent me a message on Facebook saying, "I finished Get Lennon. I'm Ava Molinar." I think that was just a great thing. And I know a lot of men who really enjoy it as well. Everybody's got an idea, it's great. Most of the women identify with the character. Most of the men come back and tell me which actress they'd like to play her. It falls between, she's based on Ava Gardner, the 1940s. Keira Knightley, or a few of the others. Maybe an American actress. Why not?
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. I feel like that's maybe a recent thing. I think not that long ago, men wouldn't read female characters. Like, I think that's why Harry Potter was a boy.
No.
Yeah. So that's a great change to hear.
Well, one of my favorite books is Charlotte Gray. I thought that was a very, very well written book, and the same with Enigma as well. They had strong female characters in it as well. But yeah, I think you're right. A lot of men wouldn't read women characters per se. But I think if you kind of mix them into, I suppose, wartime always makes them more interesting because they're doing things from a slightly different angle rather than going with soldiers. But, there's been a lot of strong female characters, in the 80s. I was a big fan of Linda Hamilton in the Terminator movies, Sigourney Weaver in the Alien movies. If you've got an actress who can really act, I don't think it bothers you whether it's a male or female driving the action.
Definitely.
That's true. It sounds like you're gonna get that movie contract soon enough.
Get a fan cast.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it was great. Thank you. We're going to look into what's going on in Ireland. I think Tara would be really interested in doing something.
Yeah, I think it would be worth coming over and doing. Amazon came over and did a KDP workshop, which was very, very well done. But I think there's no reason why Kobo can't go out and do that as well and just arrive and do a one-day festival.
Yeah. Well, if we do that, we will definitely get in touch.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're looking for Robert's titles, we will have a link to them in our show notes. Or if you're interested in learning how to grow your sales, visit KoboWritingLife.com.
This episode was produced by Stephanie McGrath and Joni DiPlacido. Edits were done by Kelly Robotham. Music was by Tearjerker, and special thanks to Robert for coming on the podcast.
If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing.